A bowl of noodles shouldn't cost you your life. But in Redemption Ridge, nothing comes free. Not food, not respect, not survival. When Mei Chen stood her ground against the town bully, she didn't know she'd just declared war on the most dangerous man in the territory. One refusal, one moment of defiance, and suddenly, a woman with nothing became the biggest threat to a system built on fear. This is the story of how she survived it. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind didn't knock in Redemption Ridge. It kicked the door down, howled through the gaps in the wood, and settled into your bones like an unwanted guest. Mei Chen had learned that in her first week. She'd learned a lot of things in that first week, none of them gentle. The laundry shop was dying, had been dying since the day she bought it with the last of her money, a foolish transaction made by a foolish woman who believed that hard work and clean clothes might be enough to earn a living. The previous owner, a gray-faced man with watery eyes, had taken her cash and disappeared on the next supply wagon, leaving behind a building that leaked, a stove that barely worked, and a customer base that didn't exist. Turned out people in Redemption Ridge didn't care much about clean clothes. They cared about staying warm, staying fed, and staying on the right side of whoever held the power that week. May had been in town 3 months. In that time, she'd washed exactly 17 loads of laundry. 11 of those had been her own. The math was simple and cruel. She would be dead by spring. So she'd pivoted. Survival required adaptation, and May had always been good at adapting. The laundry shop still existed, technically, but now the front room held 2 small tables, a makeshift counter, and a stock pot that simmered from dawn until the firewood ran out. She made noodles. Not fancy, not elaborate, just noodles and broth with whatever vegetables she could afford and whatever scraps of meat the butcher was willing to part with for nearly nothing. It was the food her grandmother had made, the food her mother had made, the food that reminded her she'd once belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was 2,000 miles and a lifetime away. She called it May's Kitchen, though there was no sign. Signs cost money. The customers came slowly at first. A few railroad workers on their lunch break, a tired mother with 3 hungry children, people who couldn't afford the established places or who were curious about the small Chinese woman cooking in the old laundry shop. They came once, ate quickly, and paid in coins that barely covered the cost of ingredients. But they came back. Word spread quietly. The food was good, really good, and cheap enough that even the poorest workers could afford a hot meal. By the end of the 2nd month, May was serving 20 bowls a day. By the 3rd month, 30. It still wasn't enough to call it success, but it was enough to call it hope. That hope walked in on a Thursday afternoon wearing an expensive coat and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name was Ray Cullens, though everyone called him Cull. He was a big man, not fat, but solid. The kind of solid that came from years of physical work and even more years of heavy drinking. He worked as an enforcer for Victor Hale, the man who owned half the businesses in Redemption Ridge and controlled the other half through debts, threats, and a sheriff who looked the other way when convenient. Cull had a reputation. Men stepped aside when he walked down the street. Women crossed to the other side. Children were taught to be quiet when he was near. May had seen him before, always from a distance. He frequented the saloon 2 blocks down, and sometimes she'd see him stumbling home in the early hours of morning when she was starting her fires for the day. But he'd never come into her shop. Until today. The bell above the door, salvaged from the laundry days, chimed weakly as Cull pushed his way inside. The lunch rush was over. Only 2 customers remained, an elderly man named Thomas who came every Thursday for the same bowl of noodles, and a young woman May didn't know, hunched over her food like she was trying to disappear into it. Both of them looked up when Cull entered. Both of them looked down immediately after. May was at the counter cleaning her cutting board. She looked up and met his eyes. "Help you?" she asked. Her English was good, better than most people expected. She'd been studying since she was a child, had practiced religiously during the long voyage across the Pacific, had refined it through 3 years of grueling work in San Francisco before the opportunity in Redemption Ridge had presented itself. People still spoke slower when they talked to her. She'd stopped correcting them. Cull walked to the counter with the careful steps of someone who'd been drinking but wasn't quite drunk yet. He planted both hands on the wood and leaned forward. invading her space in a way that was clearly intentional. "Heard you're selling food now," he said. "That's right." "Noodle soup, is it?" "Yes." "Chinese food?" It wasn't a question, but May answered anyway. "Yes, Aunt." Cole made a show of looking around the small shop, his gaze lingering on the two remaining customers before returning to May. "Seems like you're doing all right for yourself." "I get by." "That's good. That's real good." He drummed his fingers on the counter. "See, the thing is, I've been hearing about this place. People saying the food's pretty decent, saying it's cheap too. That true?" "Prices are fair." "Fair?" Cole smiled. "I like that. Fair's important in a town like this. You know what else is important?" May said nothing. "Community," Cole continued. "Being part of the community. Supporting each other. You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand English just fine." The smile flickered, just for a second, but May saw it. "Of course you do," Cole said. "So you'll understand when I say that in Redemption Ridge we have certain traditions, ways of doing things. When someone opens up a new business, it's customary for them to share a little something with the community. Show good faith, you know." May's hands had stopped moving. The cutting board was clean, had been clean for the last minute, but she kept the cloth in her hand anyway. Something to hold on to. "What kind of something?" she asked. "Well, now." Cole straightened up, pleased with himself. "In your case, I figure a bowl of them noodles would do just fine. Just a taste, you understand. So I can tell folks whether it's as good as they say. The noodles are 10 cents a bowl." The temperature in the room dropped. Cole's smile stayed fixed on his face, but his eyes went flat. "I don't think you heard me right. I'm not buying. I'm sampling. It's different. You want food, you pay for it. Same as everyone else." Behind Cole, Thomas had stopped eating. The young woman was frozen, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "See, now you're being disrespectful," Cole said, and his voice had changed. Quieter now, more dangerous. "I'm trying to be friendly here, trying to welcome you to the community proper-like, and you're throwing it back in my face." "I'm not throwing anything. I'm running a business. You want noodles? They cost 10 cents. You really don't know how things work here, do you?" "I know I paid rent on this building. I know I bought ingredients with my own money. I know I cooked this food myself." May set down the cloth, slowly, deliberately. "And I know that if you want some, you pay for it." The silence that followed was absolute. May had learned about silence in Redemption Ridge. There was the silence of winter, when snow muffled everything, and the world felt wrapped in cotton. There was the silence of exhaustion, when you were too tired to speak and too cold to care. And there was this silence, the silence before violence, before catastrophe, before everything went wrong. This was that silence. Cole's face had gone red. Not the red of embarrassment, but the red of rage barely held in check. His hands had curled into fists on the counter. "You think you're smart?" he said quietly. "You think because you can cook some Chinaman food that you're somebody important. I think I'm someone who earned what I have." "You ain't earned nothing. You're in our town, serving our people, using our goods. Everything you got because we let you have it. And if we decide you don't deserve it anymore, that's enough." The voice came from the doorway. May's eyes flicked past Cole. The door had opened without her noticing, without anyone noticing, and a man now stood in the threshold, snow dusting his shoulders. She recognized him. Everyone in Redemption Ridge knew Caleb Ward, even if they'd never spoken to him. He lived alone on a ranch about 5 miles out of town, came in once a week for supplies, and spoke to almost no one. He was tall, taller than Cole by a few inches, and lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate little. His face was weathered, lined with the kind of wrinkles you got from squinting against sun and wind for decades. His hair was dark but graying at the temples, and he wore it longer than was fashionable, pulled back in a short tail at the base of his neck. People said a lot of things about Caleb Ward. That he'd been a soldier once, that he'd killed men, that he'd lost his family to sickness or violence or his own mistakes, depending on who was telling the story, that he was dangerous when provoked, but mostly he just wanted to be left alone. May had seen him in town maybe a dozen times in 3 months. He'd never once looked in her direction. Until now. Cole turned, and some of the anger on his face shifted to annoyance. "This ain't your business, Ward." "You're in a restaurant causing trouble," Caleb said. "That's everybody's business." "I'm having a conversation with the proprietor here. Private matter." "Doesn't sound private. Sounds like you're demanding free food and getting upset when you don't get it." Cole's jaw worked. "You don't know what you walked into." "I know what I'm seeing." Caleb stepped fully into the shop and closed the door behind him. He didn't move aggressively, didn't square up or puff out his chest. He just stood there, relaxed but present. "You should go, Cole." "Or what?" "Or you'll embarrass yourself more than you already have." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. May found herself holding her breath. Thomas had pushed his bowl away and was gripping the edge of the table. The young woman had abandoned any pretense of eating and was watching the scene unfold with wide, frightened eyes. Finally, Cole laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You know what? Fine, fine." He stepped back from the counter and held up his hands in mock surrender. "I was trying to be neighborly, but if that's how it's going to be, then that's how it's going to be." He turned to leave, then paused at the door and looked back at May. "You just made a real bad choice, lady. Real bad. Mr. Hale don't appreciate people who don't know their place." "Get out," May said. Cole's face twisted, but he left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to make the bell clatter wildly. The silence that followed was different, softer, uncertain. Thomas let out a long breath. "Lord have mercy," he muttered. The young woman stood up quickly, fumbled some coins onto the table, and hurried out without looking at anyone. And Caleb Ward remained standing by the door, watching May with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you," May said finally. Caleb shrugged. "Didn't do much." "You stopped him." "Delayed him, maybe. Men like Cole don't stop." He walked over to the counter and pulled out a chair at one of the small tables. "Mind if I sit?" May blinked, surprised. "You want to eat?" "If you're still serving." Yes, of course." She turned to the pot, grateful for something to do with her hands. They were shaking slightly, she realized. Adrenaline. "Just noodles today, pork and vegetables." "Sounds fine." She prepared the bowl carefully, making sure the portions were generous, the broth seasoned properly. When she brought it to the table, Caleb was sitting with his hands folded, looking out the window at the gray street beyond. 10 cents, May said, setting the bowl down. Caleb looked up at her, and for the first time she noticed his eyes were blue, pale blue, like ice. "You always this stubborn?" he asked. "When I need to be." He pulled a coin from his pocket and placed it on the table. Then he picked up his spoon, dipped it into the broth, and tasted. May stood there, waiting. She hadn't realized how much she wanted his approval until this moment, which was absurd. This man was a stranger. His opinion shouldn't matter. But somehow it did. Caleb lowered the spoon, he looked at the bowl, then at May, then back at the bowl. Then he took another spoonful, and another. He ate slowly, methodically, finishing every bite. When the bowl was empty, he sat back and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "That," he said, "is the best damn food I've had in 5 years." Something warm unfurled in May's chest. "Thank you." "I mean it." Caleb stood, leaving the coin on the table. "You've got a gift." "It's just noodles." "It's not just noodles, trust me." He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "But you should know what happened here today. It's not over. Cole's going to tell Hale, and Hale's going to take it personal." "I know." "And you're still going to stay?" May looked around her small shop, the mismatched tables, the cracked windows, the pot of broth still simmering on the stove. It wasn't much, but it was hers. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said simply. Caleb nodded slowly, like he understood something deeper than her words. "All right then, I'll be seeing you." He left, and May was alone with Thomas, who was staring at her like she'd just walked across water. "Miss Chen," Thomas said carefully, "do you have any idea what you just did?" "I refuse to give away free food." "You challenged Victor Hale, or as good as. Cole's his man, and everybody knows it. When word gets out that you stood up to him..." Thomas shook his head. "People don't do that here. They can't afford to." "What was I supposed to do? Let him take whatever he wanted?" "Yes," Thomas said bluntly. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. It's how things work. You give a little, you stay in their good graces, and they leave you alone. It's the cost of doing business. That's not business, that's extortion. Call it what you want, but it keeps you alive. Thomas stood up, fishing coins from his pocket. I like you, Miss Chen. You make good food and you don't cheat on portions, but you just painted a target on your back, and I don't know if you're going to survive it. He left his payment on the table and walked out, moving faster than May had ever seen him move. And then she was truly alone. May stood in the empty shop, listening to the wind howl outside, and felt the weight of what she'd done settle onto her shoulders. She'd known, of course, known that defying Cole was dangerous, known that men like him didn't accept refusal gracefully, known that there would be consequences. But she'd also known something else. If she gave in now, she'd have to give in forever. She'd become just another person crushed under the boot of this town's power structure, another quiet victim too scared to speak up. And May had not crossed an ocean, had not left everything she knew, had not rebuilt her life from nothing, just to bow her head and accept subjugation. If Redemption Ridge wanted to crush her, they'd have to work for it. She returned to the counter and began cleaning up, her movements automatic. Wash the bowls, wipe down the tables, bank the fire for the night. The familiar routine calmed her, gave her hands something to do while her mind raced. The truth was, she had no plan, no strategy. She'd acted on instinct and principle, and now she'd have to live with the aftermath. The question was, how long would she get to live with it? The answer came sooner than expected. The next morning, May arrived at the shop before dawn, as always. The walk from her boarding room, a tiny space above the general store where she paid weekly rent, took 15 minutes in good weather, longer when the snow was heavy. Today it was merely cold, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache and your fingers go numb even inside gloves. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, already moving through the morning checklist in her mind. Start the fire, heat the water, begin the broth, check the vegetables. She stopped. The shop had been ransacked, not destroyed exactly, but violated. The tables were overturned, the chairs were scattered. Her stockpot, her precious stockpot, the one she'd saved for months to buy, lay on its side in the middle of the floor, dented. The small shelf where she kept her dishes had been swept clean, and broken ceramic littered the floor. And on the wall behind the counter, someone had written a message in what looked like coal. Leave or burn. May stood in the doorway, staring at the destruction, and felt something cold and hard settle into her stomach. Not fear, not anymore. Anger, pure, crystalline anger. She set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. It took 3 hours to clean up. The broken dishes went into a crate to be disposed of later. The tables and chairs were righted and checked for damage. The stockpot was dented but still functional. She'd have to work with it. The coal message on the wall proved stubborn, but after scrubbing with lye soap and hot water, it was mostly gone, just a dark smudge that could be ignored. By the time she was finished, the shop looked almost normal again, except she had only 5 bowls left and no money to buy more. And the message, faint as it was, still lingered on the wall like a threat. May stood in the middle of her shop, breathing hard from exertion, and made a decision. She would open today, serve food as usual, pretend nothing had happened, because the moment she closed her doors, the moment she showed fear, she'd already lost. The customers came hesitantly at first. Word had spread. It always spread in small towns, and people were curious or concerned or just wanted to see if she'd actually survived the night. Thomas came for lunch, looking worried. "You should have closed," he said quietly. "Then they win," May replied, setting his bowl in front of him. "Sometimes winning means living to fight another day. Sometimes fighting means standing your ground." Thomas sighed, but said nothing more. The lunch rush was smaller than usual. People were scared, May realized. Scared to be associated with her. Scared that Hale's retaliation would expand to include anyone who supported her business. She couldn't blame them. Survival required calculation, and associating with her was becoming a bad calculation. By mid-afternoon, the shop was empty again except for one customer, a tired-looking woman named Sarah, who worked as a seamstress and always ordered extra portions to take home to her children. Sarah paid an exact change as always and paused at the door. "They're saying you're crazy," she said without looking back, "standing up to Hale like this." "Maybe I am." Maybe. Sarah pulled her shawl tighter. But maybe crazy's what this town needs. She left before May could respond. The afternoon stretched long and empty. May busied herself with prep work for tomorrow, assuming there was a tomorrow, and tried not to think about the message on the wall, the dwindling supplies, the very real possibility that she'd be dead or driven out before the week was over. She was slicing vegetables when the bell chimed. Caleb Ward stood in the doorway, snow-dusting his hat. "Heard you had some trouble," he said. "Word travels fast." "Always does." He walked to the counter, his boots leaving wet prints on the floor. "You all right?" Define all right. Caleb's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Fair enough. They do much damage?" "Nothing I couldn't fix." "That's not what I asked." May set down her knife and met his eyes. "They broke some dishes, wrote a threat on the wall, made their point clear. And you're still open. I'm still open. That's either brave or stupid. Haven't decided which yet. Can it be both?" This time Caleb did smile, small and brief. "Usually is." He pulled out a chair and sat down. "I'll take the usual." "You've been here once. You don't have a usual." "Then I'll take whatever you gave me last time. That's my usual now." May found herself almost smiling as she turned to prepare his bowl. There was something steadying about Caleb's presence. He didn't fuss, didn't pry, didn't offer unwanted advice. He just existed in the space, solid and calm, like a rock in a river. She brought him his food and sat down across from him without really meaning to. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and suddenly she didn't want to stand anymore. Caleb ate in silence for a while, then said, "You know this isn't going to stop." "I know. Hale's got resources, men, money, connections. He can make your life real difficult if he wants to." "He's already started. This was just a warning. It'll get worse." "I know that too." Caleb set down his spoon and looked at her with those pale blue eyes. "So why are you still here? Why not cut your losses, sell the shop if you can, and move on? Find some place where people don't know you. Start fresh." It was a reasonable question. May had asked herself the same thing a dozen times since yesterday. "Because I'm tired of running," she said finally. "I've been running my whole life, from poverty, from war, from men who thought they owned me. I came here because I thought maybe, in a place this far from everything, I could finally stop, build something, belong somewhere. And how's that working out?" "Not great," May admitted, "but I'm not running anymore. If they want me gone, they'll have to make me leave." Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, like she'd passed some kind of test. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Who?" "Myself, long time ago." He stood, pulling coins from his pocket. "You're going to need help. You know that, right? Can't fight Hale alone." "I don't have anyone to help me." "You do now." May blinked. "What?" "I said you do now." Caleb put the money on the table. "I'll be back tomorrow, same time, and if anyone gives you trouble while I'm here, they'll answer to me." "Why would you do that?" Caleb paused at the door. "Because someone's got to, and because that food's too good to let Hale run you out of town." He left before May could find words to respond. She sat alone in her shop, staring at the coins on the table, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Outside, the wind howled, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Redemption Ridge was watching, and Mei Chen was still standing. Caleb kept his word. The next day, he walked into May's shop at exactly noon, shook the snow from his coat, and took the same seat he'd occupied the day before. He didn't say much, just nodded at May, ordered his bowl, and ate while reading a week-old newspaper someone had left behind. But his presence changed everything. The other customers noticed. How could they not? Caleb Ward was not a man who went unnoticed, and his sudden patronage of May's shop sent ripples through the careful social calculations of Redemption Ridge. People whispered, speculated. Some stayed away, convinced that associating with May would draw Hale's ire. But others came precisely because Caleb was there. Not many, but enough. Enough to fill 3 tables during lunch, enough to keep the broth pot simmering all afternoon, enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. Thomas returned on the third day, looking sheepish. Figured if Ward's willing to risk it, might as well enjoy your cooking while I can, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. May just smiled and brought him his bowl. Sarah the seamstress came back too, and brought her sister. A few railroad workers who'd been regulars before the trouble started to trickle back in. Even the young woman who'd fled during Caleb's confrontation with Cole reappeared, nervous but determined. It wasn't a flood, but it was something. Caleb never acknowledged the growing crowd. He just showed up every day at noon, ate his meal in silence, left exact change on the table, and departed with a brief nod. No conversation, no explanation. On the fifth day, May finally broke the silence. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said, setting his bowl down. Caleb looked up from his newspaper. "Doing what?" "Coming here every day, making yourself a target." "I'm not making myself anything. I'm eating lunch." "You know what I mean." Caleb folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. "You worried about me?" "I'm worried about what happens when Hale decides you're as much of a problem as I am. Hale and I have an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind where he leaves me alone and I don't burn down his lumber operation." Caleb picked up his spoon. "It's worked for years. I don't see why it'd change now." May stared at him. "You're serious? As a heart attack? You actually threatened to burn down his business?" "Didn't threaten. Just mentioned it was a lot of dry wood sitting out there unguarded, and that fires can start real easy in winter when people get careless with their heating stoves." Caleb took a sip of broth. He got the message. "That's insane. That's survival." Caleb met her eyes. "You think being polite works with men like Hale? You think playing by their rules gets you anywhere except under their boot? No, you find leverage and you hold on to it. That's the only language they understand." May sat down across from him, something she'd been doing more often lately. Her feet hurt less when she sat, and besides, Caleb didn't seem to mind. "What's your leverage?" he asked. "What?" "Against Hale. What's your leverage? Because standing on principle is admirable, but it won't keep you alive if he decides you're more trouble than you're worth." May looked down at her hands. They were rough now, scarred from burns and cuts accumulated over months of cooking. She'd had soft hands once, back when her biggest worry was which dress to wear to temple festivals. That felt like another lifetime. Another person. "I don't have leverage," she admitted. "I have stubbornness and 5 bowls." Caleb almost smiled. "That's more than most people start with." "Is it enough?" "Probably not." He went back to his food. "But it's something to build on." They sat in silence for a while, the shop quiet except for the murmur of conversation from the other tables. Outside, snow had started falling again, soft and persistent. "Why are you really doing this?" May asked quietly. Caleb didn't answer right away. He finished his bowl, wiped his mouth, and stared out the window at the white-gray world beyond. "I had a family once," he said finally. "Wife, daughter. They died during a fever outbreak about 6 years back. Whole town got sick. Doctor couldn't do nothing. Too many patients. Not enough medicine. My wife went first. My daughter lasted 3 more days." May felt something twist in her chest. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Caleb's voice was flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd told this story so many times it had lost all meaning. "Anyway, after they died, I sold everything and bought land outside town. Built a ranch, started over, kept to myself mostly. Figured if I didn't care about anything, I couldn't lose anything. And it worked. For a while. I didn't care about the town. Didn't care about politics or power or who was screwing over who. Just raised cattle, sold beef, minded my own business." He paused. "But then I saw Cull trying to shake you down, and I remembered something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That not caring is the same as being dead. You're just walking around, waiting for your body to catch up with the rest of you." Caleb looked at her, and for the first time May saw something raw in his pale blue eyes. "I've been dead for 6 years. Maybe it's time to try living again." May didn't know what to say to that, so she just reached across the table and squeezed his hand once, briefly. Caleb looked startled, like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. Then he squeezed back. "Your food's getting cold," May said, pulling her hand away. "It's already gone." "Then I'll make you another bowl, on the house." I thought you didn't give away free food. I don't. This is payment for services rendered. What services? Being decent. It's rarer than you'd think. Caleb shook his head, but he was smiling. Actually, smiling. You're a strange woman, Mei Chen. I've been called worse. She stood and went to prepare another bowl, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Behind her, Caleb went back to his newspaper, and the world kept turning. But something had shifted, something small and fragile, like the first crack in a frozen river. Neither of them noticed the man watching from across the street, half hidden in the shadow of the general store's awning. But he noticed them. And he reported back to Victor Hale that evening, describing in detail the way Caleb Ward had taken up residence in Mei Chen's shop, and the way the town was starting to forget to be afraid. Hale listened without expression, then dismissed the man with a wave of his hand. He sat alone in his office above the saloon, swirling whiskey in a crystal glass, and thought about problems and solutions. Mei Chen was a problem. A small problem, admittedly. An insignificant Chinese woman with a failing business and no connections. But small problems had a way of becoming large problems if you ignored them too long. And Caleb Ward's involvement complicated matters. Hale had been in Redemption Ridge for 15 years. He'd built his empire carefully, methodically, through a combination of strategic investments, carefully applied pressure, and a willingness to do things other men found distasteful. He owned the lumber mill, the largest boarding house, shares in the railroad depot, and enough property to control most of the commercial district. More importantly, he owned people. The sheriff, the judge, the town council. All carefully cultivated relationships, maintained through money, favors, and the occasional reminder of what happened to those who forgot their place. Caleb Ward had never forgotten his place because he'd never accepted that he had one. He existed outside the system, neither helping nor hindering, just quietly raising cattle on his land and avoiding entanglements. Hale had been content to leave him alone. Ward was dangerous, everyone knew it, but he was also predictable. He didn't cause trouble as long as you didn't cause him trouble. But now Ward was involving himself in town politics, supporting the Chinese woman, making a statement. That couldn't be allowed to continue. Hale took a long drink of whiskey and set the glass down with a soft click. He had options. Several, in fact. The question was which one would be most effective without creating unnecessary complications. Direct violence was out. Ward would respond in kind, and Hale had no interest in a war he might not win. Besides, making a martyr of the woman would only strengthen whatever ridiculous stand she thought she was making. No. This required subtlety, pressure applied in the right places, a demonstration of power that didn't look like power at all. Hale smiled and reached for the ledger on his desk. He had work to do. The changes started small. First, the price of vegetables at the general store increased, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. When May asked the proprietor about it, he shrugged apologetically. Supplier raised his rates, he said, nothing I can do about it. But May noticed that the prices stayed the same for everyone else. Only her purchases seemed to cost more. Then the butcher stopped selling her scraps. The cheap cuts of meat and bone she'd been buying for her broth suddenly became unavailable. Sorry, the butcher said, not looking sorry at all. Demand's up. I need all my inventory for regular customers. I am a regular customer. You know what I mean. May knew exactly what he meant. She switched to buying vegetables from a farmer who set up shop at the edge of town twice a week. His prices were higher, but at least he didn't refuse to serve her. Until he did. Can't sell to you no more, the farmer said the next week, packing up his cart when May approached. Got told it wouldn't be good for business. Told by who? The farmer just shook his head and drove away. May stood in the cold morning air watching the cart disappear and felt the trap closing around her. She went to Caleb that afternoon during his usual lunch visit. The shop was empty except for the two of them. The lunch crowd had thinned again, and May suspected people had received their own warnings about eating at her establishment. They're cutting off my supplies, she told him. Caleb's expression didn't change. Figured that was coming. What am I supposed to do? I can't make food without ingredients. How long can you last with what you have? May did the math in her head. 3 days? Maybe 4 if I stretch portions? Then we have 3 days to find another solution. What solution? Hale controls everything in this town. Every supplier, every merchant. If he tells them not to sell to me, they won't. Not everything, Caleb said. He doesn't control me. You're a rancher, not a farmer. You don't have vegetables. No, but I have beef, and I know people outside town who might be willing to sell to you if the price is right. I can barely afford the marked up prices here. I can't pay more. Didn't say you'd have to. Caleb stood and pulled on his coat. Let me make some inquiries. See what I can arrange. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by bad men. He headed for the door, then paused. And because I really don't want to go back to eating my own cooking. May laughed despite herself. It can't be that bad. It's worse, trust me. He left, and May went back to the kitchen, trying to calculate how to make her remaining ingredients last. She was so focused on her inventory that she didn't hear the door open again. Heard you're having some trouble. May turned to find Sheriff Bill Yates standing just inside the entrance, his badge catching the light from the window. Yates was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a mustache that had gone gray before his hair did. He'd been sheriff for as long as anyone could remember, and everyone knew he was in Hale's pocket. He didn't even try to hide it. No trouble, May said carefully. That's good. That's real good. Yates walked to the counter, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Not threatening exactly, just present. See, I've been hearing some concerning things. Talk about you operating without proper permits and licenses. I have a business license. For a laundry, not a restaurant. The license doesn't specify, but according to territorial law, any establishment serving prepared food for public consumption needs a separate food service permit. Cost is $25, renewable annually. You got one of those? May felt ice settle in her stomach. No one told me I needed one. Ignorance of the law ain't an excuse, Miss Chen. Yates pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. This here's a citation. You got 7 days to obtain the proper permit or cease food service operations. Failure to comply will result in the closure of your establishment and possible criminal charges. He placed the paper on the counter. May stared at it. Where do I get this permit? Town hall. During business hours. Yates smiled. Course, processing takes time. Could be a week. Could be a month. Depends on how backed up the clerk is. This is absurd. This is the law, ma'am. I'm just here to enforce it. Yates tipped his hat. You have a nice day now. He left, and May picked up the citation with shaking hands. $25. She barely had $5 to her name. Even if she did have the money, she knew exactly how long the processing would take, long enough to force her out of business. She crumpled the paper in her fist and fought the urge to scream. They were squeezing her from every direction, cutting off supplies, raising costs, creating legal barriers, death by 1,000 cuts. And the worst part was that it was all technically legal. Hale wasn't sending thugs to destroy her shop anymore. He was using the system itself as a weapon. May forced herself to breathe, to think. 7 days. She had 7 days to find $25 and navigate a permit process designed to fail her. Or she could close down, admit defeat, leave town before things got worse. The smart choice was obvious. But May had never been particularly smart when it came to knowing when to quit. She smoothed out the citation, read it again carefully, and started making a plan. That evening, she went to see Thomas at his small house on the edge of town. He answered the door looking surprised and a little nervous. Miss Chen, this isn't a good time. I need advice, May said. Legal advice. Thomas hesitated, glancing over his shoulder into the dimly lit interior of his house. I'm not a lawyer. But you were a clerk before you retired. You know how the system works. Knowing and being able to change it are two different things. I'm not asking you to change it. I'm asking you to help me understand it. May held up the citation. Please. Thomas sighed and stepped aside. 5 minutes. That's all I can spare. His house was small and cluttered with books and papers, the home of a man who'd lived alone too long and stopped caring about appearances. He cleared a chair for May and sat across from her at a scarred wooden table. May explained about the permit, the deadline, the obvious trap being set. Thomas listened, his expression growing more troubled. When she finished, he rubbed his face wearily. They're going to deny your application no matter what, he said. That's how it works. You submit the paperwork, pay the fee, and then they sit on it until you're forced to close. When you protest, they say the process takes time. When you close, they say you gave up too easily. Either way, you lose. There has to be a loophole. There isn't. I'm sorry, but this is how Hale operates. He doesn't break the law, he uses it. And once the machinery is in motion, it's almost impossible to stop. May's hands clenched on the table. So I'm supposed to just give up? I'm saying you're up against a system designed to protect people like Hale and crush people like you. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's reality. Then reality needs to change. Thomas looked at her with something like pity. You sound like my son used to sound, before he got shot trying to stand up to Hale's men. May went very still. I didn't know you had a son. Nobody does. I don't talk about it. Thomas's voice was hollow. He was young, stupid, brave, thought he could make a difference, confronted Cole over some protection money scheme, ended up dead in an alley. I'm sorry. Yeah, everyone's sorry, but sorry doesn't bring him back. Thomas stood, signaling the conversation was over. I like you, Miss Chen. You remind me of him, but I can't help you. I can't go through that again. May stood too, though part of her wanted to argue, to push, to make him understand, but she could see the grief carved into the lines of his face, and she knew that some wounds never healed. Thank you for your time, she said quietly. Thomas walked her to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. There is one thing. What? The permit process requires approval from the town council. 5 members. Hale controls 3 of them directly, but the other 2 are independent, sort of. If you could convince them to vote in your favor, it might slow things down. Buy you time, at least. Who are they? Marcus Webb. He owns the telegraph office. And Eleanor Price runs the boarding house on 2nd Street. They're not exactly rebels, but they're not completely in Hale's pocket either. Will they help me? I don't know, but it's the only chance you've got. May thanked him and stepped out into the cold night. She had a plan now, fragile, uncertain, but a plan nonetheless. Tomorrow she'd talk to Marcus Webb and Eleanor Price. She'd make her case. She'd fight for every single day she could stay open, and if that didn't work, she'd find another way. Because surrender wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. The next morning, May visited the telegraph office first. It was a narrow building wedged between the bank and a boarding house, smelling of ink and old paper. Marcus Webb was a thin, nervous man in his 40s with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He looked up when May entered, and she saw recognition and wariness flash across his face. Miss Chen, what can I do for you? I need to talk to you about the town council. Webb's face went carefully blank. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you know exactly what I mean. I need your vote to approve my food service permit. That's not how it works. The council reviews applications collectively. The council does what Victor Hale tells it to do. Except for you and Eleanor Price. You're the only ones who might vote independently. Webb removed his spectacles and polished them on his vest, a nervous gesture. Even if what you're saying were true, and I'm not saying it is, why would I risk Hale's displeasure for someone I barely know? Because it's the right thing to do. The right thing, Webb laughed, a bitter sound. You know how many people have told me what the right thing is over the years? You know how many of them are still here? I'm still here. For now. Webb replaced his spectacles. Look, I sympathize, I do, but I have a business to run, debts to pay, a life to maintain. Going against Hale means losing all of that. What kind of life is it if you spend it bowing to a tyrant? The kind where I wake up every morning. That's more than I can say for the people who've crossed him. May felt her frustration rising. So you'll just let him control everything, decide who succeeds and who fails, who eats and who starves? I'll survive. That's all anyone can do in a place like this. No, you can do more. You can stand up. You can... Please leave, Webb said quietly. I can't help you. I'm sorry, but I can't. May wanted to argue further, but she could see it was pointless. Webb had made his choice a long time ago, and nothing she said would change it. She left the telegraph office feeling defeated, but not surprised. Fear was a powerful motivator, and Webb had every reason to be afraid. Her next stop was Eleanor Price's boarding house. It was larger than Webb's telegraph office, a three-story building with a painted sign that read Price's Rooms, clean, affordable, respectable. Eleanor herself answered the door, a tall, stern-looking woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a practical dress and an expression that suggested she didn't suffer fools. "You're the Chinese woman with the noodle shop," Eleanor said before May could introduce herself. "May Chen. I need to speak with you about— I know what you need to speak about. Come in before you let all the heat out." Surprised, May followed Eleanor into a tidy sitting room decorated with antimacassars and faded photographs. Eleanor gestured to a chair and sat across from her, hands folded in her lap. "You want my vote on your permit application," Eleanor said. "Yes. And you think I can help you?" "I think you're one of the only people on the council who might." Eleanor studied her for a long moment. "What makes you think I'm any different from the rest of them?" "Thomas told me you were independent." "Thomas talks too much." But Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Still, he's not wrong. I don't take orders from Victor Hale. Never have." May felt a flicker of hope. "Then you'll vote to approve my permit?" "I didn't say that. I said I don't take orders from Hale. That doesn't mean I'm eager to pick a fight with him either." "I'm not asking you to fight him. I'm just asking you to vote fairly." "There's no such thing as voting fairly when Hale's involved. A vote against him is a declaration of war, whether you intend it that way or not." "Then I guess I'm declaring war." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "You've got spine. I'll give you that. Stupid spine, maybe, but spine nonetheless." "Will you help me?" Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. Snow was falling again, thick and heavy. "I had a daughter once," she said quietly. "Married a man I didn't approve of, moved to California, died in childbirth 3 years ago." She paused. "You remind me of her, stubborn, determined to do things her own way no matter who told her different. I'm sorry for your loss." "Yeah, well," Eleanor turned back to face May. "Point is, my daughter didn't listen to anyone. She made her own choices, lived her own life. Sometimes I was proud of her, sometimes I wanted to shake her until her teeth rattled, but I never stopped respecting her." "Does that mean you'll help me?" "It means I'll think about it." Eleanor walked to the door and opened it. "The council meets in 4 days. I'll let you know my decision before then." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. May thanked her and left, feeling cautiously optimistic. 2 out of 5 council members. Webb was lost, but Eleanor might be swayed. If May could find a way to convince just one more person, she'd have enough votes to at least force a fair review of her application. The question was, who? She was still pondering this when she returned to the shop to find Caleb waiting outside. A wagon loaded with crates parked at the curb. "What's all this?" May asked. "Supplies, vegetables from a farm 2 towns over, beef from my ranch, some rice and spices I picked up from a trader passing through." Caleb climbed down from the wagon. "Should keep you going for a couple weeks at least." May stared at the crates, overwhelmed. "I can't pay for all this." "Didn't ask you to. Consider it an investment." "In what?" "In proving Hale doesn't run everything." Caleb started unloading crates. "You going to help me carry these, or just stand there looking shocked?" May helped him carry the supplies inside, her mind racing. The food was a lifeline, literally, but it also represented something larger. Caleb was committing resources, time, reputation. He was making himself a target alongside her. "You know this makes you an enemy of Hale," she said as they stacked crates in the kitchen. "I've been an enemy of Hale for years. We just maintained a polite fiction that I wasn't. That fiction's over now. You could still walk away, pretend this was a one-time thing." "Could. Won't." Caleb set down the last crate and brushed off his hands. "I told you before, I'm tired of being dead. This feels like living." May looked at him, this quiet, damaged man who'd lost everything and somehow found the courage to care again, and felt something shift in her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. We've just bought ourselves time." "Time's enough." Caleb smiled, small and genuine. "Yeah, maybe it is." They spent the afternoon organizing the supplies and planning the next few days' menus. It felt almost normal, like they were business partners rather than 2 people fighting for survival. But the illusion shattered when the door burst open and Cole walked in, flanked by two other men May didn't recognize. Caleb straightened slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt, where May suddenly noticed he wore a knife. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," Caleb said. Cole grinned, ugly and triumphant. "Just delivering a message from Mr. Hale. He wants to meet with Miss Chen tonight, 8 o'clock at the saloon." "She's not going anywhere near that place," Caleb said. "Wasn't talking to you, Ward. This is between Hale and the lady." "Then Hale can come here." "Hale don't come to nobody. They come to him." Cole's grin widened. "Of course, if Miss Chen's too scared to have a conversation, I'll go," May said. Both men turned to stare at her. "The hell you will," Caleb said. "I'm not afraid of Victor Hale." "Maybe you should be." "Maybe. But I'm going anyway." May looked at Cole. "Tell him I'll be there." Cole laughed. "You got spirit. I'll give you that. Let's see if you still got it after your meeting." He and his men left, and the shop fell silent. Caleb grabbed May's arm. "This is a trap. You know that, right?" "Of course it's a trap." "Then why walk into it?" "Because maybe it's time to stop reacting and start acting. Hale wants to meet? Fine, I'll meet him. On his territory, under his terms, and I'll look him in the eye and tell him, I'm not going anywhere." "That's not brave. That's suicidal." "Then come with me." Caleb blinked. "What?" "Come with me to the meeting. You said you weren't going to let me face this alone. Prove it." For a long moment, Caleb just stared at her. Then he shook his head, half frustrated, half admiring. "You're insane." "Probably. Is that a yes?" Caleb sighed. "Yeah, it's a yes." May smiled. "Good. Then let's go meet the devil." The saloon sat at the center of town like a rotten tooth in an otherwise decent mouth. 3 stories of weathered wood and peeling paint, windows glowing yellow in the gathering dusk. Piano music drifted out into the cold air, tinny and off-key, accompanied by the low rumble of male voices and occasional bursts of laughter. May had never been inside. Women didn't go to the saloon unless they worked there, and the ones who worked there weren't the kind of women the town acknowledged in daylight. She stood outside now with Caleb at her side, watching her breath mist in the frozen air, and tried to calm the trembling in her hands. "Still time to turn back," Caleb said quietly. "No, there isn't." "Stubborn." "You keep saying that like it's a bad thing." "It is when it gets you killed." May looked up at him. In the dim light, his face was all hard angles and shadows. He'd changed before they left, put on a clean shirt, strapped on a gun belt that looked well used. The knife at his hip had been joined by a revolver that hung heavy against his leg. "You planning to shoot someone?" she asked. "Planning not to need to, but I ain't walking in there unarmed." "Will it come to that?" "Depends on Hale. Depends on you. Depends on how much either of you is willing to lose tonight." Caleb adjusted his hat. "Just remember, whatever he offers, whatever he threatens, he's trying to get a reaction. Don't give it to him." "I know how to negotiate." "This ain't negotiation. This is theater. He wants you scared, wants you to beg, wants to show everyone who has power and who doesn't." Caleb met her eyes. "So don't give him the satisfaction." May nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked up the steps together. Caleb pushed through the doors first and May followed into a wall of noise and heat and smoke. The saloon was crowded for a weeknight. Men packed around tables playing cards, lined up at the bar, nursing drinks, standing in clusters arguing about things that didn't matter. The air smelled like whiskey and sweat and sawdust. Conversation stuttered when May entered. Heads turned, eyes tracked her movement across the room. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like an animal that had wandered into a predator's den. Caleb stayed close, one hand resting casually on his gun. The gesture wasn't lost on the crowd. A few men shifted nervously. Others just watched with the kind of hunger that made May's skin crawl. "Upstairs!" a voice called out. May looked toward the bar. A woman in a red dress stood there, older, heavily painted, with hard eyes that had seen too much. She jerked her chin toward the staircase at the back of the room. "Mr. Hale's waiting. 2nd floor, end of the hall." May started toward the stairs. The crowd parted reluctantly, men stepping aside but not far, their presence oppressive. She heard muttered comments, felt hands brush against her skirt as she passed. Caleb stayed behind her, and whenever someone got too close, they suddenly decided they needed to be elsewhere. The stairs creaked under their weight. The second floor was quieter, dimmer, a long hallway lined with closed doors. Music and voices drifted up from below, muffled by wood and distance. The door at the end stood slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Caleb reached it first and pushed it fully open. The office beyond was surprisingly refined. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with volumes that looked like they'd never been read. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, throwing dancing shadows across the walls. And behind the desk sat Victor Hale. May had seen him before, of course. Everyone in Redemption Ridge knew what Victor Hale looked like. But she'd never been this close, never met his eyes directly. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 45, with dark hair going silver at the temples and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive suit, the kind you had to order from back east, and his hands were clean, manicured, nothing like the rough worker's hands that filled his saloon below. He looked like a banker. Or a politician. Someone respectable. But his eyes were wrong, too cold, too calculating. The eyes of a man who saw people as pieces on a board, to be moved or removed as strategy dictated. "Miss Chen," Hale said, standing. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. May sat. Caleb remained standing behind her, silent and watchful. Hale noticed but didn't comment. He poured 3 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, sliding 2 across the desk. "Drink?" "No, thank you," May said. Caleb said nothing. Hale shrugged and settled back into his chair, cradling his own glass. "I appreciate you accepting my invitation. I know we've had some friction lately. I thought it was time we talked like reasonable people." "Reasonable people don't vandalize businesses," May said. "Vandalize?" Hale's eyebrows rose. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to." "My shop was destroyed. A threat was written on my wall." "How terrible. Did you report it to the sheriff?" "The sheriff works for you." "The sheriff works for the people of Redemption Ridge. I'm simply a concerned citizen, like anyone else." Hale took a sip of whiskey. "But I understand your confusion. In a small town, people talk. Rumors spread. Sometimes it's hard to separate fact from fiction. There's nothing fictional about someone smashing my dishes. And you think I'm responsible?" "I know you are," Hale smiled. It was a pleasant smile, completely devoid of warmth. "You're very direct. I like that. Most people dance around accusations, afraid to speak plainly. But you've got courage. Is that why you called me here? To compliment my courage?" "I called you here to make you an offer." Hale set down his glass and leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. "I'm a businessman, Miss Chen. I understand how this town works, what it needs, where opportunities lie. And I see opportunity in you." May said nothing. "Your little restaurant, it's got potential. People like the food. You're filling a niche that didn't exist before. That shows entrepreneurial spirit." Hale paused. "But you're struggling. Supply problems, legal issues, capital shortage, all solvable problems if you're willing to be smart about it. What are you proposing?" "Partnership. You continue running the restaurant, same food, same prices, same everything, but you do it under my protection. I ensure you have steady suppliers, handle the legal complications, provide financial backing when needed. In exchange, I take a percentage of profits, say 40%. 40% for doing nothing. For doing everything that matters. For keeping you safe. For making sure your business survives." Hale spread his hands. "Think about it. Right now, you're barely scraping by, constantly worried about the next crisis. With my support, you could expand, hire help, maybe even open a second location. In exchange for giving you control of my business. In exchange for making us both money. That's how partnerships work." May looked at him across the desk, this well-dressed predator offering her scraps from his table, and felt anger burn in her chest. "No," she said. Hale's smile tightened. "No? I'm not interested in your partnership. I'm not interested in your protection. I'm not interested in anything you're offering. You're making a mistake. That's my choice to make." "Is it?" Hale's voice went soft, dangerous. Because from where I'm sitting, you don't have many choices left. Your supplies are cut off. Your permit is in jeopardy. Your customers are scared to be seen supporting you. How long do you think you can last? Long enough. Long enough for what? To prove a point? To die broke and broken? Hale shook his head. You're being foolish, Miss Chen. Pride is expensive in a place like this. So is dignity. But some things are worth paying for. Behind her, May heard Caleb shift slightly. Not moving toward his gun, not yet. But ready. Hale noticed. His eyes flicked to Caleb, then back to May. And what about you, Ward? You got an opinion on this? Not my business to have an opinion, Caleb said. I'm just here to make sure the conversation stays civil. Civil? Hale laughed. That's rich coming from a man who threatened to burn down my lumber mill. Didn't threaten, just made an observation about fire safety. Semantics. Hale stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. You know what I think? I think you're bored, Ward. I think you've been hiding on that ranch for so long you forgot what it feels like to be part of something. So now you're playing hero for a woman you barely know, pretending it means something. What I do with my time is my business. Not when it interferes with mine. Hale turned back to face them. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Both of you. I'm offering a fair deal, more than fair considering the circumstances. Take it, move on. Everyone benefits. Everyone except me, May said. I lose my independence. I become just another piece of your empire. You become successful, secure. Isn't that what you came here for? I came here to be free. Freedom's an illusion, Miss Chen. The only real freedom is having enough power that nobody can tell you what to do. And power comes from alliances, leverage, knowing when to compromise. Or from standing your ground when it matters. Hale's expression hardened. You really think you can win this? You think stubbornness and principle are enough to beat money and influence and the entire structure of this town? I think you're scared. The room went very quiet. Excuse me? Hale said softly. You heard me. You're scared. If you weren't, you wouldn't be trying so hard to force me into compliance. You'd just crush me and move on. May stood, meeting his eyes. But you can't. Because if people see a lone Chinese woman stand up to you and survive, they'll start wondering why they're so afraid. They'll start asking questions, and questions are dangerous for men like you. Hale's jaw worked. For a moment, May thought he might actually lose his composure. But then he smiled again, cold and sharp. You're absolutely right, he said. You are dangerous. Which means I can't let you keep operating, not as an independent entity. So here's my final offer. Accept my partnership, or I'll use every legal and financial tool at my disposal to destroy you. Your permit will be denied. Your suppliers will refuse to serve you. Your landlord will evict you. And when you're broke and desperate and sleeping in the street, maybe then you'll understand what power actually means. Or maybe I'll understand that some fights are worth losing. You're insane. Maybe. But I'm still saying no. Hale stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Caleb. Talk some sense into her, Ward. You're supposedly her friend. Make her understand what's at stake. She understands just fine, Caleb said. You're the one who doesn't seem to get it. She's not afraid of you, and threatening her just makes her more determined. Then you're both fools. Probably, but we're free fools. That's worth something. Hale's face flushed red. Get out, both of you. Get out of my office before I have Cole throw you out. We're leaving, May said. But understand something, Mr. Hale. I'm not going anywhere. You want to fight me? Fine. Fight me. But I'm not surrendering. Not now. Not ever. She turned and walked toward the door. Caleb followed, moving backward, keeping his eyes on Hale. They made it to the hallway before Hale called out. You'll regret this, Miss Chen. I promise you that. May didn't look back. I've regretted a lot of things in my life. Standing up to a bully won't be one of them. They descended the stairs into the crowded saloon. The noise seemed louder now, more hostile. Men watched them leave with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt to something darker. Cole stood near the door, grinning. How'd the meeting go? He asked. About like you'd expect, Caleb said. That's too bad. Mr. Hale's a reasonable man. Shame some people can't appreciate that. May walked past him without responding. Caleb followed, and and they stepped out into the cold night air. The door swung shut behind them, cutting off the noise and heat. The street was dark, empty except for pools of lamplight and falling snow. May made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. Caleb caught her, steadying her against the saloon's outer wall. She was shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline and fear finally catching up. "You all right?" Caleb asked. "No, yes, I don't know." May forced herself to breathe. "That was terrifying. You didn't show it. Inside, I was screaming. Could have fooled me." Caleb kept his hand on her arm, grounding her. "That took guts, what you did in there. Or stupidity, still haven't decided which. Can be both." Caleb glanced back at the saloon. "He meant what he said, about destroying you. He'll come at you with everything now." "I know." "And you're still not backing down?" May straightened, pulling away from the wall. The shaking was subsiding, replaced by something harder, colder. "He gave me a choice," she said. "Submit or suffer. That's not a choice. That's slavery with better words. So no, I'm not backing down. What's your plan?" "Survive. Stay open as long as I can. Make him work for every inch of ground he takes." "That's not a plan. That's a death wish." "You have a better idea?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, his breath misting in the frozen air. Then he said, "Actually, I might." May looked at him. "What kind of idea?" "The kind that's probably crazy. But then again, we're already committed to crazy, so why not go all the way?" "Caleb, marry me." May's brain stuttered to a halt. "What?" "Marry me. Legal ceremony, proper witnesses, everything official." "Have you lost your mind?" "Probably, but hear me out." Caleb's eyes were intense, focused. "You're vulnerable because you're alone. No family, no connections, no legal protection. But if you were married to someone established, someone with property and standing, that changes everything." "How?" "Property rights. Territorial law says a man's business interests are protected from outside interference. If we're married, your restaurant becomes part of my household assets. Hale can't touch it without going through me." May stared at him. "You want to marry me to protect my restaurant?" "I want to marry you to give you leverage, legal standing, a way to fight back that doesn't involve getting crushed under Hale's boot." "That's insane." "Yeah, but is it wrong?" May's mind raced. Marriage, to Caleb Ward, a man she'd known for less than 2 weeks, a stranger, essentially, despite their growing friendship, but also a man who'd stood by her when no one else would, who'd risked his own safety to support her business, who'd walked into Hale's territory at her side without hesitation. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "What do you get out of it?" Caleb looked away toward the dark mountains beyond town. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe a reason to care about something again. Maybe a way to hurt Hale without burning down his lumberyard. Maybe just the satisfaction of knowing I did something that mattered before I die. That's not a good reason to get married." "No, but it's my reason." He looked back at her. "This doesn't have to be real, not in the ways that matter. We file the papers, make it legal, use it as a shield. But it's just business, a partnership, nothing more. And if Hale retaliates against you, he'll try. But I've got land, resources, a reputation for being dangerous when provoked. He'll think twice before moving against me directly. You're risking everything for someone you barely know. So are you. Every day you keep that shop open, you're risking everything. At least this way we're risking it together." May turned away, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. Snow fell softly, accumulating on her shoulders, melting against her face. Marriage. It was absurd. Desperate, exactly the kind of reckless decision she'd promised herself she wouldn't make. But it was also strategic, practical, a genuine solution to a problem that otherwise had no answer. "How long would we stay married?" she asked. "Long as you need, could be a year, could be 5, could be until one of us dies. Doesn't matter, it's just paperwork." "Paperwork that binds us legally." "Yeah. But we can write our own terms. How we run things, what we owe each other, how we separate if it comes to that. It doesn't have to be traditional." "Have you ever been married before?" "Once, long time ago." "What happened?" "She died. Along with my daughter, I told you that." I know, but I mean, what was it like being married? Caleb was quiet for a long time. It was good. Most days, hard sometimes, but good. Having someone to come home to, someone who knew you, really knew you, and chose to stay anyway. He paused. This wouldn't be like that. I'm not offering you that. Just want to be clear. I know. So is that a yes? May turned to face him. In the lamplight, his face looked older, more lined, but also earnest, honest. This wasn't some trick or manipulation. He genuinely believed this could work. And maybe he was right. If I say yes, May said slowly, we do this properly. Legal documents, written agreements, everything clear and above board. Agreed? And we tell people it's real. A real marriage, not a business arrangement, because if Hale suspects we're gaming the system, he'll find a way to invalidate it. Makes sense. And you don't get to control my business. This is protection, not ownership. Wouldn't dream of it. May took a deep breath. Then yes. Let's get married. Caleb smiled. A real smile, not the small guarded ones she was used to. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the spirit. Caleb offered his hand. Partners? May shook it. His hand was warm, calloused, steady. Partners. They stood there in the falling snow, two desperate people who just made a decision that would either save them or destroy them. Behind them, the saloon door opened. Laughter and music spilled out, then cut off as the door swung shut again. We should tell people tomorrow, Caleb said, before Hale makes his next move. Make it official fast, give him no time to interfere. How fast? Judge Potter lives 2 streets over. He can perform the ceremony. We get married tomorrow night, file the papers the next morning. By the time Hale figures out what happened, it'll be done. Tomorrow night, May repeated. That's crazy. I know. But everything about this is crazy. Might as well commit. May laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. I'm getting married tomorrow to a man I barely know in order to protect a failing restaurant from a crime boss. This is my life now. Could be worse. How? Could be doing it alone. That sobered her. Yeah, could be alone. They walked through the empty streets together, not talking, just moving through the cold and dark. When they reached May's shop, Caleb paused. You going to be all right tonight? I survived vandalism. I can survive anticipation. Want me to stay? Keep watch. May considered it, then shook her head. No. If we're doing this, we do it right. No impropriety. No rumors that could undermine the marriage. Fair enough. Caleb tipped his hat. Tomorrow then, 6 o'clock at Potter's house. Bring a witness if you can find one. I'll ask Sarah. Good. I'll bring Thomas. He'll probably tell us we're insane. He'd be right. Caleb turned to leave, then paused. May? Yes? Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me. Thank me when this is over and we're both still alive. Deal. He walked away into the darkness, his footsteps crunching in the snow. May watched until he disappeared, then went inside her shop. It looked the same as always. The same tables, the same counter, the same faint smell of broth and ginger. But everything felt different now. Tomorrow she'd be married. Tomorrow her life would change in ways she couldn't predict. Tomorrow she'd either gain the protection she needed or make herself an even bigger target. May locked the door, banked the fire, and climbed the narrow stairs to the small room above the shop where she slept. The bed was thin, the blankets threadbare, but it was hers. For now. She lay down fully clothed, too exhausted to undress, and stared at the ceiling. In another life, she'd imagined her wedding day. A beautiful dress. Flowers. Family gathered to celebrate. A man she loved standing beside her, promising forever. This would be nothing like that. This would be a transaction, a strategic alliance. 2 people using legal machinery to fight an enemy neither could defeat alone. But as May closed her eyes and felt sleep pulling her under, she realized something. It didn't feel like just business. It felt like hope. The next day passed in a blur of frantic preparation. May opened the shop as usual, served the handful of customers who still dared to come, and tried to act like everything was normal. Sarah arrived for lunch and noticed immediately that something was different. You look weird, she said, studying May's face. Something happened? I'm getting married, Sarah choked on her noodles. You're what? Getting married, tonight, to Caleb Ward. The rancher? The guy who… Wait, when did you two even… How is this… Sarah set down her spoon. Start from the beginning and don't skip anything. May explained. The meeting with Hale, the proposal, the plan. By the time she finished, Sarah was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard, Sarah said. I know. And you're really doing it? I am. Why? Because I don't have any other options. Because Hale's going to destroy me otherwise. Because Caleb offered, and I trust him. You barely know him. I know enough. Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing. You need a witness, don't you, for the ceremony? Yes? Will you do it? Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this for anything. Sarah grinned suddenly. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't back out at the last second. I won't back out. We'll see. What are you wearing? May looked down at her work dress, stained with broth and spotted with grease. I hadn't thought about it. Of course you hadn't. Sarah stood, pulling coins from her pocket and tossing them on the table. Come with me. I've got something that'll work. Sarah, I can't afford… Didn't say you had to pay for it. Now come on, you're getting married in 4 hours and you look like you've been wrestling pigs. I've been cooking. Same thing. Despite everything, May laughed. All right, let's go. They spent the afternoon at Sarah's tiny house, where the seamstress pulled out a dress she'd made years ago for a client who'd never collected it. It was simple, dark blue wool with white lace at the collar and cuffs, but it fit reasonably well after a few quick adjustments. There, Sarah said, stepping back to admire her work. You look almost respectable. Almost? Well, you're still marrying a stranger for legal protection. There's only so much respectability available. May smiled despite her nerves. Fair point. At 5:30, they walked together to Judge Potter's house. It was a small residence near the church, distinguished mainly by the brass nameplate beside the door. Caleb was already there, standing on the porch with Thomas. Both men had cleaned up, Caleb in a dark suit that looked uncomfortable on his lean frame, Thomas in his Sunday best looking profoundly unhappy about the whole situation. You actually came, Caleb said when he saw May. Did you think I wouldn't? Crossed my mind. Same here. They looked at each other for a moment, two people about to commit to something neither fully understood. You look nice, Caleb said finally. So do you. I look like I'm going to a funeral. Maybe you are, Thomas groaned. If you two are having second thoughts, now's the time to say so. No second thoughts, May said. None, Caleb agreed. Then let's get this over with before I talk some sense into both of you. Judge Potter answered the door, an elderly man with wild white hair and spectacles thick as bottle glass. He peered at them suspiciously. Caleb Ward, what brings you here at this hour? Need you to perform a marriage, Judge. Quick as you can manage. Potter's eyebrows rose. Marriage? To who? To me, May said, stepping forward. May Chen. I run the restaurant on 4th Street. The Chinese woman. Potter looked between them. This is sudden. Love works that way sometimes, Caleb said, and May had to admire how smoothly he lied. Well, come in then. Let's make this legal. Potter's parlor was cluttered with law books and papers, smelling of dust and old tobacco. He had them stand before his desk while he rummaged through drawers looking for the proper forms. Need 2 witnesses, he muttered. Got them, Caleb said, gesturing to Thomas and Sarah. Names? Thomas Garrett, Sarah Mitchell. Potter wrote this down laboriously. And you're both of sound mind? No one forcing you into this? No one but circumstances, May said. That'll have to do. Potter cleared his throat and began reading from a small book. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here. Can we skip to the important parts? Caleb interrupted. No offense, Judge, but we're in a hurry. Potter frowned. Marriage is a sacred bond. It shouldn't be rushed. We understand that, but we've got reasons for speed that don't involve lack of commitment. The judge studied them, then sighed. Fine. Do you, Caleb Ward, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Mei Chen, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Mei looked at Caleb. His face was serious, eyes steady. No doubt, no hesitation. I do, she said. Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you man and wife. Congratulations. That'll be $5. Caleb paid. Potter handed them a marriage certificate, already filled out and signed. Just like that, it was done. They were married. Mei stared at the paper in her hands, at her name written next to Caleb's in Potter's cramped handwriting, and felt the weight of what they'd just done settle onto her shoulders. Well, Sarah said brightly, breaking the silence, this calls for a celebration. No celebration, Caleb said. We file this first thing tomorrow morning, then we tell everyone what happened before Hale hears through rumors. How romantic, Thomas muttered. It's not about romance. It's about strategy. Still the worst wedding I've ever attended. It's the only wedding you've attended in 6 years, Thomas. Exactly my point. They left Potter's house together, stepping out into the cold evening. Snow had started falling again, thick and soft. What now? Mei asked. Now we go home, Caleb said. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we fight. Together. Together. They parted ways, Sarah heading home, Thomas grumbling into the darkness, Caleb back toward his ranch. Mei watched him go, this man who was now legally her husband, and tried to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been alone. Now she was married. To a stranger. In order to fight a war she wasn't sure she could win. Mei walked back to her shop through falling snow, clutching the marriage certificate, and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or the smartest decision. She wouldn't know until morning, when Hale found out what they'd done, and all hell broke loose. Morning came too fast and too bright. Mei woke to sunlight streaming through the gaps in her curtains and the sound of someone pounding on the door downstairs. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember why her heart was racing, why her stomach felt like lead. Then it all came rushing back. The marriage, the certificate, the war they'd just declared. The pounding continued, more insistent now. Mei threw on her robe and hurried downstairs, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. Through the window beside the door, she could see Caleb standing outside, his breath misting in the freezing air. She unlocked the door and pulled it open. It's 6 a.m, she said. I know. We need to file the certificate before the county office gets busy, before word spreads. Caleb looked past her into the shop. Get dressed. We're leaving in 10 minutes. I need to start the broth. Prepare for... The shop stays closed today. This is more important. Mei wanted to argue, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept scanning the street. He was worried. Actually worried. Give me 5 minutes, she said. She dressed quickly, fingers fumbling with buttons in her haste. The blue dress from yesterday lay folded on her chair. She'd hung it carefully last night, treating it with more care than it probably deserved. But it had been her wedding dress, such as it was, and that meant something. Today she wore her usual work clothes, practical and worn. This wasn't a day for pretense. When she came back downstairs, Caleb was pacing near the counter, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. He'd started wearing it all the time now, she realized. A constant reminder of how dangerous things had become. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. They walked to the county office together through streets just beginning to wake up. A few early risers were out, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, workers heading to the railroad depot, a milk wagon making deliveries. Mei felt their eyes following her and Caleb, felt the weight of curiosity and speculation. By noon, everyone would know. By evening, Hale would know. The county office was a squat brick building that also housed the land registry and tax collection. A clerk sat behind a desk near the entrance, a thin young man with ink-stained fingers and a perpetually bored expression. He looked up when they entered, and his eyes widened slightly. Mr. Ward, ma'am, what can I do for you? Caleb placed the marriage certificate on the desk. Need to file this. The clerk picked it up, read it again. You got married? That's generally what marriage certificates mean, yeah. To Miss Chen? You know another woman named Mei Chen in this town? The clerk flushed. No, sir. When did this happen? Yesterday evening, Judge Potter officiated. Everything's legal and proper. We just need it recorded in the official registry. Right. Of course. The clerk fumbled with a large ledger, flipping through pages until he found the right section. He copied information from the certificate with meticulous care, occasionally glancing up at May like he couldn't quite believe what he was writing. There's a recording fee, he said when he finished. $2. Caleb paid. The clerk stamped the certificate, made a notation in the ledger, and handed the document back. Congratulations, he said, and he sounded like he meant it, or at least like he was genuinely confused. I hope you'll be very happy together. Thanks, Caleb said. We will. They left the office with the stamped certificate, and May felt something shift. It had been real before, legally binding, officially witnessed, but now it was recorded, permanent, part of the public record that anyone could access. There was no taking it back now. What's next? May asked. Now we wait. Go about our business. Let the news spread naturally. Caleb folded the certificate and tucked it into his coat. Hale will hear about it eventually. When he does, he'll come. We need to be ready. Ready how? Ready to stand our ground together. That's the whole point of this. They walked back toward May's shop, but Caleb steered her past it, heading instead toward the telegraph office. What are we doing? May asked. Making sure everyone knows. The more public this is, the harder it'll be for Hale to challenge it. Marcus Webb was at his desk when they entered, working on some paperwork. He looked up and his face went carefully neutral. Ward, Miss Chen. It's Mrs. Ward now, Caleb said. We got married last night. Webb's pen clattered to the desk. You what? Married. Legal ceremony, properly witnessed, filed with the county this morning. Thought you should know, seeing as you're on the town council. Why are you telling me this? Because it affects the permit application May filed. As my wife, her business falls under my household assets, which means any attempt to interfere with it becomes an attempt to interfere with my property rights. Territorial law is pretty clear on that. Webb's face had gone pale. You're using marriage as a legal shield. I'm protecting my wife's livelihood. That's what husbands do. Hale's going to lose his mind. That's his problem. No, it'll be everyone's problem. You just backed him into a corner. He can't let this stand without looking weak. Then maybe it's time he learned to lose gracefully. Caleb tipped his hat. Good day, Webb. I trust you'll share this news with the other council members. They left Webb sitting there in stunned silence. Their next stop was Eleanor Price's boarding house. Eleanor answered the door herself, took one look at their faces, and sighed. Come in, and please tell me you didn't do something catastrophically stupid. Define catastrophically stupid, May said. That bad, huh? Eleanor led them to her sitting room. All right, let's hear it, Caleb explained. When he finished, Eleanor sat back in her chair and stared at them like they'd just announced they were moving to the moon. Well, she said finally, that's certainly one way to solve the problem. Will it work? May asked. Legally? Yes. Ward's right. Territorial property law gives him significant protection over household assets. Hale can't just shut down your business without going through proper channels, which means courts, which means time and public scrutiny. Eleanor paused. But that doesn't mean he won't try other methods. What kind of methods? The kind that don't show up in legal documents. Intimidation, accidents, making your lives so miserable you give up on your own. Let him try, Caleb said. He will. And he'll escalate until something breaks. The question is whether you two can hold out long enough for him to give up first. We don't have a choice, May said. It's this, or surrender. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. You remind me so much of my daughter. She had that same stubborn look right before she married that worthless man I told her to avoid. She stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle and 3 glasses. But she was happy, at least for a while, and she made her own choice. That counts for something. She poured whiskey into the glasses and handed them out. What are we drinking to? Caleb asked. To catastrophically stupid decisions. May they work out better than they deserve to. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it felt good. Grounding. I'll vote for your permit, Eleanor said, setting down her glass. Won't be enough to pass it. Hale still controls the majority. But it'll be on record that not everyone in this town bows to him. Thank you, May said. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if you're both still alive in 6 months. They made 2 more stops, one to Sarah's house to share the news officially, another to the general store to buy supplies. By noon, the whole town was buzzing. May could feel it in the way people stared as she walked down the street, the way conversation stopped when she entered a shop, the way eyes followed her and Caleb everywhere they went. Mrs. Ward, that's what they'd call her now, the Chinese woman who'd married Caleb Ward, the outsider who'd somehow convinced the town's most notorious recluse to come out of hiding, the woman who'd declared war on Victor Hale. They returned to the shop in early afternoon. May had planned to stay closed for the day, but when they arrived, they found a small crowd gathered outside. Thomas was there, along with Sarah and her sister, the tired mother with 3 children, a handful of railroad workers, even the young woman who'd fled during Caleb's first confrontation with Cole. They all turned when May and Caleb approached. "Is it true?" Thomas asked. "You 2 really got married?" "It's true," May said. "And you filed it legally? It's official?" "Recorded with the county this morning." A murmur ran through the small crowd. May couldn't tell if it was approval or disapproval. Then Sarah started clapping, slow at first, then faster. Others joined in, hesitant, uncertain, but genuine. "Congratulations," Thomas said, and he was smiling, actually smiling. "You might have just saved this whole town and not even know it yet." "How do you figure?" Caleb asked. "Because you showed everyone that Hale can be challenged, that there are ways to fight back that don't involve getting shot in an alley." Thomas's smile faded. "My son didn't know that. He went at Hale head on and it got him killed. But you 2, you found a smarter way, a legal way." "It's not over," May warned. "Hale's going to retaliate." "Of course he will, but you're still standing. That's more than most people manage." The mother with 3 children stepped forward. She was holding a cloth bundle. "Made you a wedding gift," she said shyly. "I know it's not much, but..." She unwrapped the bundle to reveal a small embroidered tablecloth, simple white linen with blue thread forming a border of interlocking circles. May felt her throat tighten. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. You've been kind to us. Always give us extra portions when you think I'm not looking. I wanted to give something back." May took the tablecloth carefully, running her fingers over the careful stitching. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Others pressed forward with small offerings, a jar of preserves, a loaf of fresh bread, a carved wooden spoon, nothing expensive, nothing grand, just tokens of support from people who had very little to give. By the time the crowd dispersed, May's counter was covered with gifts, and her eyes were wet. "Looks like you've got more friends than you thought," Caleb said quietly. "Or more people willing to risk being friends now that I've got protection." "Does it matter? Either way, you're not alone." He was right. May looked at the modest collection of gifts, evidence that not everyone in Redemption Ridge was afraid, that some people still believed in decency, and felt something warm in her chest. "I should open the shop," she said. "People came here expecting food. I should feed them. Tomorrow. Today we rest. Tomorrow we fight." That night, they sat in the empty shop discussing logistics. Where Caleb would stay. His ranch was too far for daily commuting, especially in winter. Whether May should move to the ranch for safety. How to manage the business now that they were legally joined. "I can stay upstairs," Caleb said, gesturing to the small room above the shop. "That way I'm here if trouble comes, and it maintains appearances. Married couples live together. That room is barely big enough for me. I've slept in worse." "Caleb, we need to make this look real. That means living like we're actually married. I don't need much space, just somewhere to sleep." May wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. If people suspected the marriage was just a legal maneuver, it would undermine the whole strategy. "Fine, but we need ground rules." "Such as?" "Privacy, boundaries. This may be a marriage on paper, but we're still 2 separate people." "Agreed. Anything else?" "We're honest with each other. No secrets, no lies. If this is going to work, we need trust." Caleb extended his hand. "Deal." They shook on it, and May felt the rough calluses of his palm against hers. Strange to think this man was her husband now. Stranger still that it felt almost right. I'll bring my things tomorrow, Caleb said. Not much to move. Some clothes, books, personal items. The ranch can run itself for a while. I've got hands who know what they're doing. You're giving up a lot for this. I'm investing in something that matters. First time in years I can say that. He left shortly after, heading back to his ranch for one last night in his own bed. May watched him go, then climbed the stairs to her small room. Tomorrow, he'd be living here, sharing her space. Technically, her husband in the eyes of the law and the community. It should have felt invasive, uncomfortable, wrong. Instead, it just felt like she was finally not facing everything alone. May lay down and pulled the new tablecloth over herself like a blanket. The embroidery was careful, deliberate, made by hands that knew hardship, but still found time for beauty. Tomorrow, Hale would hear about the marriage. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. But tonight, wrapped in a stranger's gift and a desperate hope, May slept better than she had in months. The explosion came at dawn. Not a literal explosion, though for a moment, jerked awake by thunderous pounding on the door, May thought the building might be collapsing. She stumbled down the stairs, heart hammering, and found Sheriff Yates on her doorstep with 3 deputies she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Ward," Yates said, and the name sounded wrong in his mouth. Mocking. "We have a warrant to search these premises." May's brain was still foggy with sleep. A warrant for what? Suspicion of operating an unlicensed food establishment and potential health code violations. Step aside, please. You can't just... I can, and I am. You want to contest this. Take it up with Judge Potter. But right now, I'm executing a legal warrant. The deputies pushed past her into the shop. May watched in horror as they began rifling through her kitchen, opening cupboards, dumping ingredients onto the counter, pulling pots and pans from shelves. "Stop!" she shouted. "You're destroying everything." "We're conducting a thorough inspection," Yates said calmly, "making sure everything's up to code. This is retaliation, because of the marriage. This is the law, ma'am. Not my fault if you chose an inopportune time to get married." They tore through the shop for 20 minutes, making a show of inspecting everything while actually just creating chaos. Flour spilled across the floor, preserved vegetables were dumped into the sink. Her precious stockpot, already dented from the vandalism, was examined and declared potentially contaminated. By the time they finished, the shop looked like it had been hit by a storm. "We'll be filing a full report," Yates said, stepping over the mess his men had created. "Expect a hearing before the council within the week. Until then, this establishment remains open at your own risk." "At my own risk? You just destroyed half my inventory." "That's between you and your insurance, assuming you have insurance." Yates tipped his hat. "Have a nice day, Mrs. Ward." They left, and May stood alone in the wreckage of her shop, shaking with rage and helplessness. This was Hale's answer. Fast, brutal, technically legal. He'd heard about the marriage and struck back within hours, using the very system they'd tried to use against him. May picked up her stockpot from where it had been left on the floor. More dents now. One handle bent, but still functional, just like her. She was still standing when Caleb arrived an hour later, a wagon loaded with his belongings. He took one look at the shop and his face went hard. "When?" "This morning. Sheriff came with a warrant, said they were inspecting for health violations." "They do any actual inspecting or just destruction?" "What do you think?" Caleb walked through the shop, cataloging the damage. When he spoke again, his voice was flat, controlled. "This is how he plays. Can't attack us directly, so he uses proxies. Makes it look official, legal. Can we fight it?" "Not through the system. He owns the system." Caleb turned to face her. "We fight by not breaking. By cleaning this up and opening tomorrow like nothing happened. Half my supplies are ruined. Then we replace them. I've got money saved. We buy new ingredients, restock, keep going." "For how long?" "Until he comes back with another warrant, another inspection, another legal excuse to destroy everything?" "As long as it takes, until he runs out of excuses or we run out of money, whichever comes first." May looked at the mess, at the spilled flour and broken jars, and the message it all spelled out clearly. "You can't win. Give up. Go away." She picked up a broom. "Then we'd better get started," she said. They worked through the morning, sweeping and scrubbing, salvaging what they could and making lists of what needed replacing. Caleb moved his belongings upstairs, a single trunk of clothes, a box of books, a rifle that made May nervous just looking at it. For protection, he said when he saw her expression. From who? The sheriff? We can't shoot the sheriff. No, but we can make sure he thinks twice before coming back alone. By noon, they'd restored a semblance of order. Not perfect. There were still stains on the floor, still missing supplies they couldn't immediately replace, but functional. May made a simple broth from what remained and hung her handwritten sign in the window, open. The first customer arrived within minutes, then another, then 5 more. Word had spread about the raid. Instead of scaring people away, it had done the opposite. People came to show support, to prove that Hale's intimidation wouldn't work, to buy bowls of soup they might not have otherwise purchased. By mid-afternoon, May had served more customers than any day since the trouble started. It's working, Sarah said, finishing her 3rd bowl. What you two did, the marriage, standing up to him, people are noticing. Or they're just curious, May said. Maybe. But curious is better than terrified. And every person who comes here, every bowl you sell, that's a small victory against him. Thomas came in later looking troubled. Council's meeting tomorrow, he told them. Emergency session to discuss your permit application. Hale's pushing for an immediate denial based on the inspection report. Can he do that? Caleb asked. He can try. The inspection gives him grounds to claim health concerns, but Eleanor and I are going to fight it, force an actual debate instead of rubber stamping his decision. Will it matter? Probably not. He's got the votes, but it'll be on record, and it'll buy you a few more days. A few more days. That's all they had. A few more days before the council vote, before Hale's next move, before the next crisis. But a few days was better than nothing. That night, May and Caleb sat in the shop after closing, counting the day's earnings. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover the cost of replacement supplies. But it was something. We're not going to win through money, Caleb said, stacking coins. He's got too much of it. Every dollar we make, he can spend 10 making our lives harder. Then how do we win? We outlast him. We make it more expensive for him to fight us than to leave us alone. We create enough public support that crushing us becomes politically inconvenient. Caleb paused. And we wait for him to make a mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind where he goes too far, gets too aggressive, does something that even his bought and paid for allies can't ignore. Caleb met her eyes. Men like Hale always overreach eventually. They get so used to winning they forget to be careful. When that happens, we need to be ready. Ready to do what? Whatever it takes. The determination in his voice was almost frightening. This wasn't just about protecting May's business anymore. This had become personal for Caleb, a way to fight the helplessness he'd felt for 6 years, a chance to matter again. May reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you, she said, for everything, for standing with me, for risking your safety, for— Don't, Caleb interrupted gently. Don't thank me. This is as much for me as for you, maybe more. You gave me a reason to care again. That's worth more than you know. They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped across the table, 2 damaged people holding onto each other in the dark. Then Caleb stood, breaking the moment. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder. He headed upstairs to the small room they now shared space in, him sleeping on a bedroll on the floor, her in the narrow bed. It was cramped and awkward and nothing like a real marriage, but it felt like partnership, like alliance, like maybe, despite everything, they were building something real out of this desperate gambit. May locked the door, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to where Caleb was already settling in for the night. Good night, husband, she said, testing out the word. Caleb smiled in the darkness. Good night, wife. It should have been strange, should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing either of them had said all day. The next morning, they woke to find a notice nailed to the shop door. Council hearing, permit application, May Chen Ward. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Attendance mandatory. Ward. They'd used her married name, officially acknowledged the marriage even while trying to destroy what it protected. Tomorrow, May said, staring at the notice. They're not wasting time. Neither will we. Caleb pulled the notice down and crumpled it. Today we prepare. Tomorrow we fight. They spent the day gathering allies, visiting everyone who'd shown support, asking them to attend the hearing, to speak up if they could. Not everyone agreed, fear still ran deep in Redemption Ridge, but enough said yes to give them hope. Eleanor Price promised to speak on their behalf. Thomas would present legal arguments against denial. Sarah and her sister would testify about the quality of May's food. Even the mother with 3 children agreed to come, though she was terrified. It's not much of an army, Caleb observed that evening. It's what we have. Yeah, and it'll have to be enough. That night, unable to sleep, May came downstairs to find Caleb already there, sitting at one of the tables, cleaning his gun by lamplight. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much thinking. Want to talk about it? May sat down across from him. What happens if we lose tomorrow? If the council denies the permit? We appeal. Take it to territorial court if we have to. That costs money we don't have. We'll find it, borrow it, sell something, figure it out. Caleb reassembled the gun with practiced ease. Point is, we don't quit. Not tomorrow, not ever. What if quitting is the smart choice? Caleb looked up at her, his pale blue eyes intense in the lamplight. Is that what you want? To quit? No. But I'm scared of what happens if we don't. Me too. But I'm more scared of going back to how things were, being alone, being dead inside, this fight, this mess we've gotten ourselves into. It's the first time in 6 years I've felt alive. He paused. So yeah, I'm scared, but I'm not quitting, not unless you are. May thought about that, about everything she'd built, everything she'd risked, everything she stood to lose, and she thought about the alternative, bowing to Hale, accepting defeat, spending the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she'd just been brave enough to keep fighting. No, she said firmly, I'm not quitting either. Then we've got our answer for tomorrow. They sat together in the quiet shop, surrounded by the smell of spices and old wood, and prepared for war. Tomorrow, the council would vote. Tomorrow, Hale would make his move. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, they were still standing, still fighting, still together, and that would have to be enough. The town hall was packed by the time May and Caleb arrived at 1:45. People filled every bench, lined the walls, spilled out into the hallway. Some had come to witness the spectacle, others to support. A few, May suspected, just wanted to see her fail. Victor Hale sat at the front in the section reserved for business owners, his posture relaxed, his expression confident. He wore another expensive suit, this one charcoal gray with a silver watch chain glinting across his vest. When his eyes met May's, he smiled, the same cold, empty smile from their meeting in his office. The 5 council members sat at a raised table facing the crowd. Marcus Webb looked nervous, shuffling papers without reading them. Eleanor Price sat straight-backed and severe, her face giving nothing away. The other 3, all men May recognized but had never spoken to, leaned together, whispering. Hale's men, clearly. Sheriff Yates stood near the back, arms crossed, watching everything with the detached interest of someone who already knew how this would end. Caleb guided May to a seat near the front where their supporters had gathered. Thomas gave them a tight nod. Sarah squeezed May's hand. The mother with 3 children offered a trembling smile, her youngest asleep on her lap. At exactly 2:00, Webb banged a gavel. This emergency session of the Redemption Ridge Town Council is now in order. We're here to discuss permit application number 47, filed by May Chen. He paused, glanced at a paper. Now, May Chen Ward, for operation of a food service establishment at the property commonly known as the Old Laundry Building on 4th Street. His voice was shaky. May wondered if he'd been threatened, bribed, or simply scared into compliance. The applicant is present, Webb continued, as is her husband, Mr. Caleb Ward. Sheriff Yates has submitted an inspection report following a compliance check conducted yesterday morning. The council will hear testimony, review the report, and vote on whether to approve the permit. One of Hale's council members, a heavy-set man named Carson, spoke up immediately. Given the severity of the violations noted in the inspection report, I move we skip testimony and proceed directly to denial. Seconded, said another council member, a thin man called Marsh. Hold on, Eleanor said sharply. We have citizens here who traveled in the cold to speak. The least we can do is hear them. Mrs. Price, the report is quite clear. The report is a piece of paper written by men with an agenda. I want to hear from people who've actually eaten at Mrs. Ward's establishment, people who can speak to the quality and safety of her food. Carson's face reddened. Are you suggesting Sheriff Yates falsified his report? I'm suggesting we do our jobs and listen to testimony before making decisions. Unless you're afraid of what people might say. The room stirred. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Webb banged his gavel again, looking increasingly uncomfortable. We'll hear testimony. 5 minutes per speaker. Mrs. Price, you wanted to speak first? Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirts. She walked to the front and turned to face the room, her gaze sweeping across the crowd before settling on the council. I've lived in Redemption Ridge for 32 years, she began. I've watched this town grow from a railroad camp into a real community. And in all that time, I've seen the same pattern repeat. Someone with money and power decides what's allowed and what isn't, who succeeds and who fails, who belongs and who doesn't. Carson started to interrupt, but Eleanor spoke over him. I've eaten at Mrs. Ward's restaurant 6 times in the past month. The food is excellent, the premises are clean, the service is courteous. I've never once felt unsafe or concerned about the quality. She paused. But more importantly, she's providing something this town desperately needs. Affordable, nutritious meals for working families. People who can't afford the prices at the hotel restaurant or the saloon. That's not relevant to the permit application, Marsh protested. It's completely relevant. We're supposed to consider community benefit when approving business permits. Mrs. Ward's restaurant benefits the community. Denying her permit benefits only those who see her as competition. Eleanor's eyes landed on Hale for just a moment before returning to the council. I vote we approve the permit, and I recommend we do it based on merit, not politics. She sat down. The room buzzed with conversation. Thomas went next, presenting a dry but effective legal argument about due process and the suspicious timing of the inspection. Several people in the crowd nodded along, though the council members looked bored. Sarah spoke about the quality of the food, describing specific dishes with enough detail that May saw people in the audience unconsciously licking their lips. The mother with 3 children stammered through a brief testimony about how May's cheap meals had kept her family fed during a hard winter. Then others spoke. People May hadn't even asked to testify. A railroad worker who said May's soup reminded him of his grandmother's cooking. An elderly woman who claimed May had given her free food when she couldn't pay, something May had done only once, thinking no one noticed. With each testimony, May felt the mood in the room shift. Not dramatically, not enough to guarantee victory, but enough to create doubt, to make denial slightly harder to justify. Finally, Webb looked uncomfortable enough to sweat despite the cold. Any other testimony? He asked. Hale stood. The room went silent. Mr. Hale? Webb said nervously. You don't have standing as an applicant or, I'm a concerned citizen and business owner. I have every right to speak. Webb looked at the other council members, who nodded. 5 minutes. Hale walked to the front with the easy confidence of a man who owned the room. He didn't face the council. He faced the crowd. I've heard a lot of touching stories today, he began, his voice smooth and reasonable, about good food and hard times and community spirit, and I don't doubt any of it. Mrs. Ward probably does make excellent soup. She probably has helped people. He paused, letting the words settle. But none of that changes the facts. This building was licensed as a laundry, not a restaurant, Mrs. Ward converted it without proper permits, without required inspections, without following the regulations that exist to protect public health. The sheriff's report documents multiple violations: improper food storage, inadequate ventilation, questionable water source. Those violations were manufactured, Caleb said from his seat. Mr. Ward, you're out of order, Webb said quickly. Let him speak, Eleanor said. This concerns his household property. He has standing. Hale smiled. Please. I'd love to hear Mr. Ward's perspective. Caleb stood slowly. He didn't walk to the front, just stood where he was, tall and solid, his hand resting near his gun belt. Those violations are convenient timing, he said. My wife files for a permit, gets denied based on technicalities, applies again, gets raided by the sheriff, and suddenly there's a report full of problems that didn't exist the day before. The problems existed, Yates called from the back. You just didn't notice them. I notice everything about my wife's business. I notice the clean kitchen, the proper storage, the care she takes with every meal. I also notice when powerful men use the law as a weapon against people who won't bow down to them. The room erupted. Some people shouted agreement, others protested. Webb banged his gavel frantically. Order! We need order! Hale's smile had frozen on his face. Mr. Ward, are you accusing me of something? I'm saying my wife operates a clean, safe, honest business, and the only reason we're here debating it is because she refused to pay tribute to you. That's a serious accusation. Then deny it. Hale's eyes went cold. I don't need to deny baseless slander. The inspection report speaks for itself. The inspection report was written by your employee executing your orders. The sheriff works for the territory, not for me. Does he? Because from where I'm standing, everyone in this room works for you except the people you can't buy or threaten. Yates moved toward Caleb, his hand on his gun. That's enough, Ward. You're disrupting an official proceeding. I'm defending my wife's rights. That's what husbands do. Or am I supposed to just sit quiet while you railroad her? You're supposed to show respect for the law. I respect the law. I don't respect men who abuse it. The tension was unbearable. May could see Caleb's hand hovering near his gun, Yates moving closer, the crowd leaning forward in anticipation of violence. Eleanor's voice cut through it all. Gentlemen, this is a council meeting, not a saloon brawl. Everyone sit down before someone does something spectacularly stupid. Yates stopped. Caleb held his ground for another moment, then slowly sat back down. May grabbed his hand under the table, squeezing hard. Thank you, Eleanor said dryly. Now, we've heard testimony. We've seen the report. Time to vote. I move we approve Mrs. Ward's permit application. Seconded, Thomas said immediately. All in favor? Webb asked. Eleanor and Thomas raised their hands. The other three council members sat motionless. All opposed? Carson Marsh and the third man, Williams, raised their hands. Motion fails 3-2. The permit application is denied. The words hung in the air like an execution sentence. May felt something collapse inside her chest. She'd known it was coming, had prepared for it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that preparation couldn't touch. However, Eleanor said, and there was steel in her voice, I'm formally requesting this decision be reviewed by the Territorial Governor's Office. The denial appears to be based on political considerations rather than legitimate health concerns, which violates territorial commerce law. Carson sputtered. You can't. That's not. I absolutely can. It's in the council bylaws. Any member can request territorial review if they believe a decision was made improperly. I'm exercising that right. This is absurd, Hale said, his composure finally cracking. The council voted. It's done. The council voted. The review is separate. And it'll take, what, Thomas? 4 to 6 weeks to process? Thomas nodded, a grim smile on his face. At least. Maybe longer if the governor's office is backed up. Could be 2 months. During which time, Eleanor continued, Mrs. Ward is allowed to continue operating under provisional status pending the review outcome. That's not how it works, Carson argued. Actually, it is. Territorial law says businesses can't be shut down during an active appeal process unless they pose an immediate danger to public health. Since Mrs. Ward's establishment hasn't poisoned anyone or caused any documented harm, she keeps operating. May stared at Eleanor, barely daring to believe what she was hearing. You're bending the rules, Hale said quietly, and his voice was dangerous now. I'm using the rules. Same as you've been doing for years. Difference is, I'm doing it for someone who deserves protection instead of someone who deserves to fail. The room exploded into chaos. People shouting, arguing, half the crowd on their feet. Webb banged his gavel uselessly, his voice drowned out by the noise. Hale stood perfectly still in the center of the storm, staring at Eleanor with an expression that promised retribution. Then he turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that followed his departure. May watched him go and knew this wasn't over, not remotely. But they'd won something today. Time. A reprieve. A chance to keep fighting. Webb adjourned the meeting in a strangled voice. People filed out slowly, some stopping to congratulate May and Caleb, others avoiding eye contact. Eleanor approached them as the crowd thinned. "You bought yourself 2 months," she said. "Maybe 3 if we're lucky. Use them wisely." "Why did you do that?" May asked. "You're making yourself a target." "I'm a 70-year-old widow with more money than I can spend and no one left to leave it to. What's Hale going to do? Kill me? I'd like to see him try." Eleanor's eyes were fierce. "Besides, my daughter would have done the same thing, wouldn't have hesitated for a second. About time I lived up to her example." She left before May could respond, walking out with her head high and her back straight. Thomas lingered. "That was reckless, brilliant, but reckless." "Will the review actually take 2 months?" Caleb asked. "If we file it right, if we argue every procedural point, if we request extensions and documentation and make ourselves as annoying as possible." Thomas allowed himself a small smile. "I was a clerk for 20 years. I know every loophole, every delay tactic, every bureaucratic weapon available. I'll use them all." "Thank you," May said. "Thank me by surviving and by making sure that food is actually as good as everyone says. Because if this goes to a real review, quality matters." He left too, and finally it was just May and Caleb in the nearly empty hall. "We didn't win," May said. "We didn't lose either. We're still in the fight." "For how long?" "Long enough." They walked back to the shop through streets gray with late afternoon snow. People watched them pass, some with respect, some with fear, some with the careful neutrality of those who hadn't yet chosen sides. When they reached the shop, they found Sarah waiting with a basket. "Brought dinner," she said. "Figured you'd be too exhausted to cook after that circus." Inside the basket was bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a bottle of wine someone had probably given Sarah in payment for sewing work. They ate together at one of the small tables, the 3 of them, barely talking, just sharing food and presents. "What happens now?" Sarah asked eventually. "We wait," Caleb said. "Keep the shop open. Build support. Make it harder for Hale to shut us down without looking like a tyrant. And when the review comes back, we hope it goes our way. And if it doesn't, we fight again. Different battlefield, same war." Sarah studied them both. "You're not going to give up, are you? Either of you?" "No," May said simply. "Good. Neither am I." Sarah raised her glass of wine. "To catastrophically stupid decisions and the stubborn people who make them." They drank to that, and despite everything, May felt something like hope. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. The shop stayed open. Customers came. More every day, actually, as word spread about the council meeting and Eleanor's dramatic intervention. Some came for the food, others came to make a statement. Either way, business was better than it had ever been. Hale didn't retaliate directly. No more raids, no more vandalism, no more overt threats. But his presence was constant, a pressure May felt even when she couldn't see it. Prices stayed high at the suppliers who'd serve her. Credit was mysteriously unavailable. Small difficulties appeared and reappeared, never quite catastrophic, but always draining. Caleb handled what he could, using his contacts and resources to keep the shop supplied. He'd moved in completely now, his presence in the small room upstairs becoming comfortable, familiar. They'd fallen into a rhythm. May cooking, Caleb managing logistics, both of them working side by side through long days that bled into longer nights. It still wasn't a real marriage. They were careful about that. Separate sleeping spaces, polite boundaries, professional partnership first. But something was shifting. Small moments accumulated. Caleb's hand steadying her when she stumbled on ice. May saving him the best pieces of meat from each batch of broth. The way they'd started finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs. One night, 3 weeks after the council meeting, May came upstairs to find Caleb sitting by the small window, staring out at the dark street. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much thinking." "About?" "About what happens if we actually win. If the review goes our way and Hale has to back down." Caleb glanced at her. "What then? We just keep going like this?" May sat down on her bed, facing him. "What else would we do?" "I don't know. I guess I never really thought past surviving, never considered what comes after." "Does there have to be an after? Can't we just take it day by day?" "That's not much of a future." It's more than I had a month ago. Caleb smiled slightly. Fair point. He was quiet for a moment. You ever regret it, the marriage? May considered the question honestly. No, it was desperate and crazy and probably doomed to fail. But I don't regret it. You? No. Turns out being married to you isn't as bad as being dead inside. What a ringing endorsement. You know what I mean. May did know. She knew exactly what he meant because she felt it too. This strange, unexpected connection that had formed between two people who'd started as strangers and become, what? Partners, allies, friends. Maybe more than friends, if either of them was brave enough to admit it. But that was a conversation for another night. For now, survival was enough. The territorial review arrived in the 5th week. Thomas brought the letter to the shop personally, his hands shaking as he handed it to May. Just came through the telegraph office, he said. Official response from the governor's office. May's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Caleb stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. The letter was formal, bureaucratic, full of legal language that took 3 paragraphs to say what could have been said in 1 sentence. But the conclusion was clear. The territorial governor's office had reviewed the permit denial and found insufficient evidence of health violations to justify closure. The Redemption Ridge Town Council was ordered to issue the permit immediately or face sanctions for improper denial of legitimate business applications. May read it twice, then a 3rd time, not quite believing. We won, she said. We won, Caleb confirmed. Thomas laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. You actually won. I hoped, but I didn't actually think. What does this mean? May asked. Practically. Practically, it means Hale lost. Publicly. On record. The council has to approve your permit or openly defy the territorial government. Either way, you're protected. Sarah burst through the door, having heard the news from someone at the telegraph office. Is it true? You won? We won, May repeated, and this time it felt real. Word spread fast. By noon, the shop was packed with people celebrating, congratulating, or just wanting to witness the moment when David actually beat Goliath. Eleanor came by in the afternoon, looking satisfied. Told you bureaucracy could be a weapon, she said. Just needed the right person wielding it. Thank you, May said, for everything, for believing in us when no one else would. Believing is easy. Fighting is hard. You two did the fighting. I just held the door open. The council issued the permit 2 days later with no comment, no ceremony, no acknowledgement of the battle that had been fought. Just a piece of paper signed by Webb and delivered by a clerk who wouldn't meet May's eyes. But it was official, legal, permanent. May's Kitchen had won the right to exist. Hale never retaliated, never acknowledged the loss. He simply retreated. Stopped paying attention to the small Chinese restaurant that had dared to challenge him. Moved on to other battles, other targets. Some people said he was biding his time, waiting for another opportunity. Others said he'd decided May wasn't worth the effort anymore. May didn't care which was true. She was too busy running her business, feeding her customers, building the life she'd fought so hard to protect. 2 months after the permit arrived, on a quiet Tuesday evening after the last customer had left, May and Caleb sat together at one of the small tables, sharing a bottle of wine Sarah had brought to celebrate some milestone or another. We should probably talk about this, Caleb said eventually. About what? About us. The marriage. What it means going forward. May's heart beat faster. What do you want it to mean? Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, the way he had that first day when he'd intervened with Cull, like he was seeing something precious and worth protecting. I want it to mean something real, he said quietly. Not just a legal arrangement, not just business, something actual. Like what? Like a partnership, a real one, where we build a life together instead of just surviving side by side. May set down her wine glass carefully. Are you saying you want this to be a real marriage? I'm saying I've been living with you for 2 months, eating your food, watching you work, seeing how you treat people, how you fight for what matters, how you refuse to give up even when giving up would be easier. Caleb paused. And somewhere in all that, I stopped pretending this was just strategy. It's not. Not for me. Not anymore. May felt tears prick her eyes. It stopped being just strategy for me about 3 weeks ago. When you fixed my stove without being asked, and made sure I ate dinner even when I was too tired to want to, and sat up with me when I couldn't sleep because I was worried about money. So we're both idiots who fell into this by accident? Looks that way. Caleb laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. We could probably do worse for a foundation. Probably. So is that a yes to making this real? May reached across the table and took his hand. It's been real for a while. We were just too scared to admit it. I'm still scared? Me too. But I'm less scared with you than I was alone. Caleb squeezed her hand. Then I guess we're doing this. Guess we are. He stood and pulled her up with him, and for the first time since their hasty wedding in Judge Potter's parlor, Caleb kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, the kiss of two people learning each other for the first time. When they pulled apart, May was smiling. That was nice, she said. Just nice? Very nice. I can work with that. They stood there in the quiet shop, holding each other, and May felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness, exactly. Happiness was too simple a word for the complex mix of relief and hope and cautious joy she felt. But it was close. Close enough. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and persistent. The wind that had seemed so cruel when May first arrived in Redemption Ridge now just sounded like weather. Normal. Survivable. Inside, the shop was warm. The broth pot sat clean and ready for tomorrow. The tables were wiped down. The floor was swept. Everything was ready. For customers. For challenges. For whatever came next. But right now, in this moment, May wasn't thinking about tomorrow. She was thinking about Caleb's arms around her, about the life they'd built from desperation and stubbornness, about how sometimes the best things came from the worst circumstances. Come on, she said, taking his hand. Let's go to bed. Together? Together. They climbed the stairs to the small room that had somehow become theirs. The narrow bed wouldn't comfortably fit two people, but they'd figure it out. They'd figured out everything else. Me changed while Caleb politely turned away, and they settled into bed with the awkwardness of people navigating new territory. But awkwardness faded to comfort, and comfort to warmth, and warmth to sleep. And for the first time since arriving in Redemption Ridge, May slept without fear, without worry, without the constant weight of survival crushing her chest. She slept like someone who'd found home. Spring came slowly to Redemption Ridge, the way it always did, grudgingly, reluctantly, like the land itself was tired of the cold but too stubborn to admit it. The snow melted. Mud replaced ice in the streets. Green things started pushing up through the earth, and May's kitchen thrived. The permit was no longer questioned. The supplies flowed steadily. Caleb had found new sources, better sources, suppliers who didn't bow to Hale's pressure. The customer base grew until May was serving 50 bowls a day, then 70, then 100. She had to hire help. Sarah's sister first, then two others. The shop that had been a failing laundry, then a desperate food stall, then a battlefield, had become an actual restaurant. Small, but successful. Profitable even. Caleb sold some cattle and invested the money in improvements. A new stove. Better tables. Proper dishes to replace the mismatched collection May had been using. He even commissioned a sign, painted wood, with careful letters that read, MEI's Kitchen, Best Food in Redemption Ridge. That's not very modest, May protested when she saw it. It's not modest. It's true. Ask anyone. The sign went up, and people came to see it, and stayed to eat, and came back again. Victor Hale's empire didn't crumble. He was still powerful, still rich, still controlled most of the town's economy. But cracks had appeared. Small ones, barely visible, but there. Eleanor Price convinced two other business owners to stand up to some of Hale's more egregious demands. Thomas started quietly organizing people who were tired of paying tribute. Even Marcus Webb found his spine eventually, voting against Hale on a zoning issue that would have driven a competitor out of business. Redemption Ridge didn't transform overnight. It was still a hard place, a cold place, a place where survival required sacrifice, but it was a little less afraid than it used to be. And in that small reduction of fear, possibility bloomed. 6 months after their midnight wedding, May and Caleb stood in the shop one evening after closing, looking at the space they'd fought so hard to protect. "We should expand," Caleb said. "Expand? There's a building next door, been empty for years. We could buy it, knock through the wall, double our seating." "That's expensive. We've got savings now, and I could sell more of the ranch land I'm not using. Invest it here." May looked at him. "You'd do that? Give up your ranch for a restaurant?" "I'd do that for our restaurant. For our life, for our future." Caleb pulled her close. "The ranch was where I went to hide. This is where I came back to life. Easy choice." May leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her back. "What if we fail? What if we expand and lose everything? Then we fail together, build something else. Try again." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "But I don't think we're going to fail. I think we're going to succeed in ways we haven't even imagined yet. When did you become an optimist?" "When I married a stubborn woman who refused to quit even when quitting was the smart choice." May smiled. "I love you." It was the first time she'd said it out loud. The first time either of them had. Caleb turned her to face him. "Say that again." "I love you." "I love you too. Have for a while now. Just didn't know how to say it." "You could have just said it." "Where's the drama in that?" They kissed, and it was different from that first tentative kiss months ago. This was familiar, certain. The kiss of two people who knew each other, trusted each other, had chosen each other deliberately and completely. When they pulled apart, May said, "Let's do it. Let's expand. Let's build something bigger." "You sure?" "I'm sure. We didn't fight this hard just to play it safe forever." "All right then. Tomorrow, we start planning." But tomorrow could wait. Tonight they locked the door, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to the room they shared. A room that was finally big enough now that Caleb had knocked out a wall and expanded it into the unused storage space. They had a real bed now. A dresser, curtains, small comforts accumulated over months of careful saving. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. May changed and climbed into bed, and Caleb joined her, pulling her close. Outside, a late spring storm was brewing. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain began to patter against the windows. But inside they were warm, safe, together. "Thank you," May said quietly. "For what?" "For tasting my noodles that first day, for standing up to Cull, for asking me to marry you, for fighting when I was too tired to fight alone. Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me, for giving me a reason to care again. We saved each other." "Yeah, I guess we did." They lay there listening to the rain, two people who'd started as strangers in a hostile town and become partners, allies, lovers, family. The future was uncertain. Expansion would be risky. Hale might retaliate eventually. 100 things could go wrong. But for the first time in her life, May wasn't afraid of uncertainty. She had Caleb. She had her business. She had people who cared whether she succeeded or failed. She had a home, and that was worth everything they'd risk to find it. Outside, the storm raged. The wind howled. The rain lashed against the building. But Machen Ward, wife, business owner, survivor, fighter, slept peacefully through it all. She'd weathered worse storms than this, and she'd weather whatever came next. Together with the man beside her, she was ready for anything.